The chair by the door. Frank DeLuca had always kept his chair facing the window. Not the TV, not the wall. The window, specifically the narrow strip of Dorchester Avenue he could see from his living room, the cracked sidewalk, the same 3 parked cars, the corner store with the flickering Budweiser sign that swayed and rattled. He'd watched that sign flicker for 11 years, like the angles inside him. Never got fixed. He respected that somehow. It was wearing down just like him. At least it was honest about what it was. He was 9 years old. 2 tours in Vietnam. 31 years Boston PD. He'd pulled boaties out of the harbor. He'd talked jumpers down off the Tobin Bridge twice. He'd buried his wife Carol on a Tuesday in November, when the ground was so cold the shovels rang like bells. He was not a man who scared easy. But loneliness, helplessness, the exhaustion of hope, those scared him now. But the silence of that phone, that got him. His son Danny lived 40 minutes away. Needham, nice house, 2-car garage, everything, and a father he'd forgotten. Frank had helped him move in, 68 years old and too proud to ask for help with the heavy ones. He'd carried boxes up 3 flights, sweating through his shirt. Danny had shaken his hand at the end of the day. Shaken it, like they'd just closed a business deal. That was 3 years ago. Now it was Christmas cards and maybe a call on his birthday. If Danny remembered, if he remembered before noon, that is. Usually he didn't. Frank had done the thing all the old men do. He'd called, left messages. Hey, it's Dad, just checking in. Give me a ring when you get a chance. Calm voice, reasonable, not desperate. He'd been a cop for 30 years. He knew how to keep his voice steady and professional when everything underneath was not. Danny didn't call back till Frank called again. Told himself it was normal. Told himself the kid was busy, 2 jobs, the kid's school schedules, all of it. He understood. He was reasonable. He was a reasonable man. He called 6 times in 1 month. Danny picked up once. Talked for 4 minutes. Had to go. Frank put the phone down, sat in his chair, and looked at the flickering Budweiser sign for a long time. The thing nobody tells you about getting old is that it's not the body that goes first. It's the story you tell yourself. For 50 years, Frank's story was simple. I am a man who shows up. Vietnam showed up. Police Academy showed up. Carol's chemo, 3 rounds. Every appointment showed up. Danny's Little League, every game, even the away games in Worcester in the rain, showed up. And I always will. Those who know me know that. That was the whole story. That was Frank DeLuca, a man who showed up. But you can't show up somewhere you're not invited. And somewhere between Danny's childhood and now, the invitation had gotten lost or rescinded. Frank didn't know when. That was the part that kept him up at night, lying in the dark, ceiling above him. Going back through 30 years of memories like a detective working a cold case, looking for the thing he'd missed, the moment he'd gotten it, wrong. Was it the divorce? I tried to stay. I really tried. Was it how hard I worked? But I kept the lights on. I put food on the table. Was it that I didn't say it enough? I love you. Did I not say it enough? He'd been raised by a man who never said it once. He'd thought he was doing better. Maybe he wasn't. The call that changed things came from his sister Rosemarie, down in Providence. She wasn't calling about Danny. She was calling about their cousin Sal, who was also in his 70s and also estranged from his kids, and who had apparently spent the last 2 years trying to guilt his daughter into calling through increasingly elaborate medical exaggerations. He told her he had a heart murmur, said Rosemarie. He doesn't have a heart murmur, Frank. He has heartburn. Frank laughed. First real laugh in a while after he hung up. He sat there thinking about Sal, and then he stopped laughing because he recognized something in it. Not the lying he hadn't done that, but the machinery underneath it, the need, the reaching, the willing yourself to be pitied because at least pity was contacted, recognized it because he'd felt it, and that recognition disgusted him in a way that was actually useful. Frank DeLuca had walked point in the Mekong Delta at 22 years old. He had not done that to spend his remaining years performing sadness for a son who wasn't even watching. He put the phone in the kitchen drawer, left it there for 2 weeks. The veterans' wood shop met on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at the VFW Hall in Quincy. Frank had driven past it for years and never gone in. He went in on a Thursday in February, 6 inches of snow on the ground, and a guy named Hector with one hand, lost the other one in Fallujah, handed him a piece of oak and told him to make something. Like what? Said Frank. Anything, said Hector. That's the whole point. Frank made a terrible birdhouse, crooked roof. The hole was off. Hector looked at it and said, that bird's going to have self-esteem issues. And Frank laughed so hard his eyes watered. He went back Tuesday. He started making a bench. Slow, nothing fancy, but he was learning the wood, how it wanted to split, where it pushed back, where it gave. There was something honest about it. The wood didn't care who his son was. The wood didn't care what he'd done right or wrong in 1987. The wood just was what it was, and you either learned to work with it or you fought it and lost. Frank was tired of fighting things he couldn't change. He also started walking. Just Dorchester at first, then over to Ward, South Boston, then eventually down to the harbor on the good days. He'd stop at the same bench, look at the water, drink his coffee. Sometimes he'd nod at other old men doing the same thing. Sometimes they'd talk. Mostly they didn't have to. There's a whole city of men like Frank, he realized, sitting with things too heavy to carry alone and too personal to explain. Danny called in April. Frank was in the backyard, attempting to start a container garden because Hector had said it was easy and Hector had lied. He was kneeling in the dirt, genuinely annoyed at a tomato seedling. When the phone buzzed in his pocket, he looked at the name. Stood up slowly. The knees? Always the knees now. He let it ring twice more. Not as a power move. Frank wasn't built for games. Just because he needed a second to decide who he was going to be when he picked up Dot. Not the man who'd called 6 times in a month. Not the man in the chair watching the window. He answered Danny. Hey, Dad. A pause. You okay? I called last week. You didn't pick up. I was out. Another pause. Danny hadn't been expecting that. Frank could hear it, the small recalibration on the other end of the line. They talked for 20 minutes, longer than they had in years. Frank didn't push, didn't ask when he was coming by, didn't mention the months of silence or the unreturned calls. He just talked to his son like a man talking to another man, asked about the kids, told him about the wood shop, Hector, the birdhouse, the bench. Danny laughed at the birdhouse story. He had Carol's laugh. Frank had almost forgotten Dot when they hung up. Frank stood in his backyard for a moment. The tomato seedling was still drooping, still probably dying. He straightened it anyway, pressed the soil around the base, gave it some water. Maybe it would make it, maybe it wouldn't. That wasn't the whole point anymore. The bench took him 3 months. When it was done, he carried it out to the backyard himself, set it under the old maple, and sat on it, solid, level. The joints fit clean. Hector walked around it twice, knocked on the wood, and said nothing, which Frank had learned was the highest possible compliment. Frank sat on that bench on summer evenings and drank his coffee and watched the neighborhood go by. Sometimes Danny called, sometimes he didn't. When he did, Frank was glad. When he didn't, Frank was still there, still present, still inhabiting his own life. Still a man with places to be and things he was building. He moved the chair away from the window. Didn't throw it out, just moved it. You don't throw out a whole history. You just stop organizing your life around the waiting. Carol had told him once, early on, that the thing she loved about him was that he was always somewhere, never floating, always planted in whatever ground he was standing on. He'd lost that for a while. He had it back now. The Budweiser sign was still flickering. He didn't watch it anymore. He had a bench to sit on and a garden that was against all odds, actually producing tomatoes. Small ones, lopsided, nothing like the picture on the seed packet. He ate one standing in the backyard one morning, still warm from the sun. It was the best thing he'd tasted in years.